Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So this is going to be my Arrow episode 11 video, Midnight City. So before the episode aired, there was a bunch of new information that was released. They cast Jimmy Olsen on Supergirl, so I'll talk a little bit about that. And there were some details about things from behind the scenes on Arrow, so I'll try to explain that too. I guess just to get through that stuff first. So one of the writers on Arrow said that they do have a set for the Lazarus Pit. They didn't say how they're going to use it, but they do say that they make a lot of hot tub time machine jokes on the set when they're walking around. So just because they have a Lazarus Pit doesn't mean we're going to see anyone get resurrected or anything like that, but it is pretty cool to know that they have one. They confirmed Brick is not a metahuman on the show. He's just a normal guy that's super tough. They're still trying to figure out Ray Palmer's character, so his storyline isn't set in stone. And the Suicide Squad is confirmed to be coming back later this season, in present day. They wouldn't say whether or not Cupid was going to be on the team. And Makad Brooks is the one that they cast as Jimmy Olsen on Supergirl, so he'll be like a giant Jimmy Olsen. He's a big guy. Okay, so moving on to Arrow stuff. Just careful for spoilers from the episode if you haven't seen it yet, starting with top 5 moments. Number 5, Black Canary false starts. This episode is part 2 of what they're calling the Canary trilogy, so that's going to conclude with next week's episode. They're telling the story of how Laurel takes the mantle. Part of that is her getting her ass kicked. Like as you saw through the episode, she fell a lot, she tripped a lot, she got cut to shreds, and most of Team Arrow doesn't think that she's up to the task. Although I think most of them come around by the end of the episode. I know it seems like they're moving really fast, but I do feel like they address the issue of her not being ready to be a superhero. It's just that their need for a symbol like the canary is more important than their belief that Laurel isn't ready. So I think you'll see a lot of training montages, a lot of Laurel getting better in the next episode. That fight with Brick is another good example too. So she knows when to cut and run. Like there's no way she's gonna beat Brick. So obviously she's gonna have to jump out that window. That was actually one of the best stunt sequences of the episode. I always like it when Arrow can give really badass stunts to people that are not Stephen Amell. Yeah, he's the hero of the show. He's always going to get the best stunts, but it's fun while he's away for them to give those stunts they would normally give to him to other characters. I feel like them using this time to show Laurel getting better as Black Canary also gives them the opportunity to show the other side characters, like the other female characters, getting better, becoming more heroes in their own right. Moving on to number 4, Team Oliver and Team Merlin will do anything to protect their families. When I say Team Oliver, I'm talking about like the Maceo stuff that's going on with the League of Assassins and the flashback stuff with China White. Team Merlin obviously just being Merlin and Thea. It wasn't really clear in the previous episode, but I really feel like they were trying to mirror Maceo and Merlin's characters in this episode. They both do really questionable things in the name of protecting their family. It's a little clearer with Maceo, like you know he loves his family. Merlin has been a villain in the past, so it's a little harder sell. But yes, I do think that Merlin really cares about his family. It's just, he's so twisted inside that his methods are just way beyond what a normal person would ever consider acceptable. You can't handle the truth. Roy was not wrong. Thea's totally going to figure out what's going on for real, like the stuff that Merlin did not tell her, like the details of how she's involved, and shit's totally going to go down. This is a family matter. That just makes things so much more fun to think about when you frame it in that context. The overarching narrative. There's some other big stories that I think are going on that I'll talk about. It kind of makes you think of Batman Death in the Family. In the part of Robin dying is played by the Sarah Lance Canary. Arrow has a long history of borrowing from some of the best Batman stories, which I think is awesome that DC lets them do that. If you can't have Batman, why not take one of his best stories? Moving on to number 3, Felicity gives everyone a jump start. I feel like she has a second career as a nighttime superhero therapist. I hope she gets paid extra for that. They're moving things pretty fast. I expected her to be on the outs, to kind of be circling all the teams for a little bit longer, but she jumped back in really quick. By the end of the episode, she was totally helping Ray Palmer build more gear for his Atom suit and helping Team Arrow replicate Sarah's voice. It wouldn't be a team with Felicity down there though, and I feel like the Ray Palmer character doesn't work without the Felicity scenes. At least not yet. With all the crazy stuff that goes on each week, with all the Ra's al Ghul stuff, it's easy to forget how important Felicity is to the other characters. She's the mechanic that keeps the machine working, and the machine is Team Arrow, and whatever is going to become Team Palmer or Team Atom. And speaking of Felicity scenes, the way they opened the episode, that Oliver nightmare, that's my new favorite opening scene from any Arrow episode. Moving on to number 2, Ra's al Ghul is looking for Oliver's body and may or may not be faking Maceo out. There's this narrative symmetry that Arrow always has with the flashbacks, where something in the past always highlights something that might be happening in the future. So Maceo being faked out by Amanda Waller, like her swapping the samples knowing that Maceo was going to betray her, might say something about what Ra's al Ghul is doing in the present. So maybe Ra's al Ghul knows that Maceo is going to help Oliver, so he's leading him on in a bid to try and get to Merlin, knowing that Oliver is going to go back to Starling. Right now it's not super clear, it's a little bit early, so it might be a little bit more complicated than that. But Ra's al Ghul is the master assassin and a master planner, so any story that he's involved in is always going to be way more complicated than it seems. Think about that Felicity scene at the beginning, that nightmare, where she said, "I think that Ra's al Ghul is going to use your humanity against you." So maybe Ra's al Ghul is doing the same thing to Maceo, knowing that he would save his friend. And my number one moment from the episode, Danny Brickwell takes over the Glades and it becomes Arrow No Man's Land. If you're not familiar with the Batman story No Man's Land, it's a story of how Gotham goes through this giant earthquake a la Undertaking. Martial law is declared. The United States kind of draws a giant line around it and says, this is no longer part of the United States because it's so awful. The Justice League isn't allowed in to fix things just because it becomes such a political problem. It's not a problem that can be solved with superpowers. So Batman has to use the resources that are left inside the city and his allies to fix everything. It's a really great comic book, so you should definitely check it out. But it's kind of what's going on in the Glades right now. I mean, it's not a carbon copy, but Arrow is inspired by a lot of big Batman stories, and it also even resembles Dark Knight Rises just a little bit, you know, where Gotham is kind of left as its own little territory for a while. We're still in the middle of the Canary trilogy, so what I'm wondering is if like the next mini arc, like after Oliver returns, is going to be No Man's Land, the story of how Oliver and Team Arrow fixes Starling City. So just taking a step back, let's look at how all the characters shifted in the episode. So right now, Brickwell is the clear villain of the series. Ra's al Ghul is kind of floating in the background. He's very sinister, but he hasn't done anything overtly evil yet. Merlin, acting in the interest of his family, kind of, you know, riding the line between good and evil. Then you have Team Arrow, all good characters. I'd be really interested to see like where the battle lines are drawn and what alliances are made now that Brickwell's become such a huge force in the city. Does that mean that Team Merlin and Team Arrow are going to have, you know, some slight overlap? I don't know that they'll be buddying up anytime soon, but I'm just holding out hope for that Merlin-Oliver fighting scene. Whenever they're not fighting each other, they kind of team up in a temporary alliance to fight Ra's al Ghul or someone else that Oliver thinks is worse than Merlin. So here's my big question for you guys. Now that Brickwell has become the clear villain of the series, or at least for right now, and is demarcated his territory, do you think that Team Merlin and Team Arrow will help each other out at some point? While you guys think about that, just to talk about some of the Easter eggs I spotted. So I already talked about the Batman story No Man's Land. Just to reference The Flash though, in a, you know, kind of a backdoor Easter egg, a lot of people ask, you know, will Canary get her canary cry? Will Laurel get the canary cry? I don't think she's ever going to be a metahuman, but if you look at the way Pied Piper's powers work with the sonic technology, it's possible that they could adapt that type of technology for her at some point. So if you want Laurel to get closer to the canary cry in the comics, I think that's the way to do it. If you did spot any other Easter eggs in the episode, just write them below in the comments. But, you know, there was a lot of other great stuff, a lot of funny moments that I just didn't fit into my video, like Brickwell thinking of himself as Julius Caesar, or Felicity helicopter rides. So, a lot of great stuff. The only real thumbs down I had in the episode was the explanation of how Amanda Waller swapped the Alpha. So she pulled a fast one on Maceo, knowing that he was going to betray her. I feel like they didn't set that up well enough. I'm not really a big fan of when shows ask you to make this huge leap without setting it up in a real clear way. The fake Alpha was a really big deal. It was a really big part of the episode. If Oliver is supposed to be an analog of Batman, world's greatest detective, he should be able to put two and two together. They kind of did that at the end of season 2, where he was able to pull a fast one on Slade, who he himself is a really smart person. It feels like sometimes they're kind of inconsistent with that, where it's like the character's only smart when the narrative needs them to be smart, as opposed to being smart all the time. So just in general, I feel like all the characters need to take a couple more courses in detective work. You guys can let me know if you agree though. Does it frustrate you when characters don't see things that are right in front of their face? Like, yes, this double crosser here, probably gonna double cross me at some point. I know a lot of you guys have been asking, there have been some IMDb descriptions for future episodes for Arrow and The Flash. I'm not gonna mention them in this video. You can talk about them in the comments if you want, just please use spoiler tags. There have been liberal spoilers for what's going to happen at the end of episode 12 and what's going on in episode 13, as well as some big stuff that's gonna be happening on The Flash too. So I'm totally happy to talk about that stuff. I don't want to put it in the literal video, so I kind of leave that for the comments. And for people asking about Agent Carter episode 4, I wasn't able to start that video in time, so I decided to push it to Thursday, so I wouldn't be too caught up with my Arrow stuff tonight. I'd rather have one video post late than have two videos post late. So don't worry, I'll talk about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Black Widow program and all that stuff in that video. I will be doing like an Arrow Flash Q&A like I normally do. I'm not exactly sure when that's going to post, so you'll have plenty of time to post questions. It's just that there's going to be a Game of Thrones trailer tomorrow, so that's like at the top of my priority list. So while you guys wait for all that stuff to happen, you can click here to catch up on The Flash from last night, and you can click here for last week's episode of Arrow. thank you so much for watching. So let's all high five. I'll see you guys tomorrow.